Welcome to the Savvy Podcast, your go-to show for boosting your listening skills while exploring fascinating topics with real-world conversations. In this episode, we're joined by Pau, our student and resident history enthusiast. In the first half, we'll delve into the roots and evolution of the English language, its fascinating journey through time. Then, in the second half, we'll explore the historic ties between the two great nations, England and Spain, uncovering stories of alliances, rivalries, and cultural exchanges that shaped their shared history. Let's dive in, shall we? Welcome, Pau. How are you?
Thank you. I'm fine, thank you. What about you, Sam?
I'm very well. I can't complain. It's a beautiful day today. Now, who are you and why are you here?
I'm a secondary school teacher and I'm here because I have a passion for history and I want to talk about history and language.
Okay, perfect. So could you start by telling me a little bit about how historical events shape language?
Well, it is rather enlightening to see how historical events can leave a footprint on a language. And English, in that sense, is a case in point. As I'm sure most people know, English is a Germanic language, unlike Latin languages like Spanish, Italian, French, just to name a few. However, despite this, we can find a large number of words that are similar to Spanish. And this begs the question, why is it so?
Perfect. So there's some amazing vocabulary that we can pick out there. First of all, you said footprint. What is a footprint?
A footprint would be huella in Spanish.
Good. And there was a few connecting words as well. However, the translation would be?
Sin embargo.
Perfect. And also, finally, you use a lovely expression at the end, begs the question. Could you explain that a little bit?
That's a difficult one. I don't think we have an expression in Spanish for that.
Okay, but it means to encourage a question.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And so when did the Romans arrive?
Well, let me give you a date, 43 AD, which is funny because the acronym AD is a Latin acronym. It means Anno Domini, in other words, in the year of the Lord.
Okay, that's interesting because I was taught at school that it was AD was after death, so after Jesus' death, but that is incorrect, you're telling me?
Yes, that's what most people think, but actually, AD is Anno Domini, in the year of the Lord. However, BC is before Christ. Although you can also say BCE, which is before Common Era.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So the Romans came, and what happened then? Yes,
so the Roman Emperor Claudius arrived into the British Islands, and after long years of battles and war, secured Great Britain as one of the Roman provinces. This is the first time Roman words made their way into the British Islands, where Celts and local tribes like the Brits were living, as you said before.
Yes, so before the Romans, it was Gaelic was the common language in the British Isles, and in some parts of the British Isles, it is still spoken. For example, in Scotland, Wales, and in Ireland, but the majority of people speak English now.
Yes, and then we have another important date in British history, which is 410 AD, and that's when the Roman Empire was crumbling from tip to toe, so the Romans withdrew from the British Islands.
Good, and what is tip to toe?
De pies a la cabeza.
So what happened after the Romans had left?
Well, the Celts and the Brits still lived there, but once the Roman went off the radar, the Saxons, the Angles, and the Utes, Germanic tribes that lived on the continent, seized the opportunity and crossed the Channel and took over the territory, pushing the Brits off the island. into an area in France which is now Brittany.
Good, and you've used some more fantastic vocabulary. To take over, what is to take over?
That would be to take control of the island.
Good, perfect, okay. So we had the situation there, and then what happens from there?
So with them, the Germanic tribes brought their different languages that blended with the Roman words which they had borrowed on the continent. For instance, triumph or dictator, who happened to be a magistrate in charge of the empire in times of dire emergency.
Okay, I didn't know that. Very interesting. And so is that language similar to the language that we are speaking today together?
Not really. That language at the time was known as Old English. And the way that language worked reflected Germanic values like loyalty and elements that we can find in most popular epic poems in Old English, like the Beowulf. And then we have, of course, the Norman Conquest in 1066.
Oh, I know that date. I think every British person knows this date. And why was it so important?
That is the last time that the British islands were conquered, and who were the Normans. The Normans were basically Vikings that had settled in what is today Normandy in France, and they spoke a French dialect. So when they laid their hands on England, they brought new words into Old English, French words that derived from Latin.
Okay, and also some vocabulary to look at there. To settle. What is to settle somewhere?
Asentarse.
So they settled there. And then there was the invasion in 1066. And how did that affect the language?
At that time, as a consequence of that, we have 3 different languages being spoken in Great Britain: Latin for religious purposes and also academic purposes, French for official documents, and what is called vernacular, which is Middle English, mainly spoken among people.
Okay, and so for Spanish people speaking English, how has the Latin affected the way that they speak English?
Yes, so we have some examples, like, let me give you one. For example, to ask. To ask is a verb that has got a Germanic root, and then we have its Latin counterpart, which is to question. Because Latin was meant to be more formal at the time. To question is more formal than to ask, but they both mean the same.
Good, that's a very good example of that. And that is a fantastic run through of the history of the English language. That is the end of the first section of this podcast, and we will come back in a few seconds to talk about the history of England and Spain. Now we're going to continue talking about the links between Spain and England throughout history. And this story really comes together with Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. But Pau, could you explain this story a little to our listeners?
Yeah, so I think we could say that that was the first Brexit, and Spain was to blame for that. Because Henry VIII basically married Catherine of Aragon, who previously had been married to Henry VIII's brother, Arthur. So Arthur died, and Henry VIII married Catherine of Aragon, who did not provide an heir to Henry VIII.
How dare she?
Exactly, how dare she? Well, actually, Henry VIII thought that The reason why she didn't was because she was married to his brother, and he thought that that was a bad omen, and that's why she didn't provide an heir to the English crown.
Okay. So what was his action?
So Henry VIII filed for divorce.
Okay, and this wasn't common at the time in the Catholic world.
It was a risky move. Obviously, he had at the time his handwright man.
His right-hand man. His
right-hand man, who was Cromwell, suggested filing for divorce. That didn't go down well. The Pope did not accept the divorce. One of the reasons because Spain was a really powerful kingdom. Henry VIII decided to break away from the Roman Catholic Church in 1534, and that was the first Brexit.
Good, perfect. And what is to break away? Because that's a useful phrasal verb for our students.
That would be to disconnect, or in Spanish would be romper.
Good, perfect, fantastic.
Take into account that at the time there wasn't such a thing as a political Europe or a union, and what we had at the time was Christendom, which was basically the glue that stuck together the different kingdoms in Europe.
Good, perfect. And to stick together is to keep together, is to keep joined together.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, what happened next? The story doesn't finish there.
It doesn't. Once Henry VIII broke away from the Roman Catholic Church, he married Anne Boleyn, who was a Protestant.
She was a Protestant. She was a beautiful young Protestant. And she managed to provide an heir to Henry, didn't she?
Not really. First of all, Henry VIII had a daughter with Catherine of Aragon, who was Mary, Bloody Mary.
Yes, she comes in later, yes.
Yes. And he also had a daughter with Anne Boleyn, who was Elizabeth.
Okay, perfect. So first, after Henry's death, his son became king, who was a brief king for only 6 years, I think. And then we had Bloody Mary. Could you tell me about the reign of Bloody Mary?
Well, Bloody Mary, apart from being a lovely cocktail, was a Catholic queen in England who, after she died, was succeeded by her other sister, Elizabeth I. Bloody Mary was married to Philip II, King of Spain, and when she died, Philip II did try to marry Elizabeth I too, but she turned him down.
To turn down is to rechazar.
Rechazar.
Is to reject. So Elizabeth turned him down, and he was not happy. How did he react?
Well, next thing, the Spanish Armada is on its way to Great Britain.
And I will happily talk about the Spanish Armada. What happened when the Spanish came over to the cliffs of Dover?
Yeah, so let's say that the weather wasn't very nice at the time.
Was it the weather, or was it the strength of the British fleet?
I think, like everything in history, you can't boil it down to just one reason.
And sorry, you just said a really good phrasal verb there, to boil down to, which is to...
Limitar, to boil it down. So there were several reasons for that. One of them was the weather, but another reason was also the tactics, strategic reasons. And in that sense, the British outmaneuvered the Spanish Armada.
Yes, and the story does not end at the Spanish Armada, because the competition between the Spanish and the British empires really intensified in this period of history, with the colonization of South America and other areas of the world. Could you explain, Pau, how this relationship continued into the future?
Yeah, so obviously South America was a hot point in international relationships. In the 18th century, we have a really important event which didn't happen in South America, happened in North America, which is the 7 Years' War in 1756 to 1763. And that is important because after that war, the British Parliament had to levy taxes to compensate that war.
Could you explain a little bit the reasons behind that war? Who were the Spanish supporting? Who was involved in the war?
There were several countries involved. Russia was one of them, also France, also Native Americans. So basically what happened next was, after levying taxes, the 13 colonies weren't happy about that. So they did try to and managed to become independent in the Independence War, and they were also supported by Spain.
And this this competition didn't end there, because then in South America, when we have the War of Independence, the British supported South American nations in their fight against the Spanish.
Yeah, basically the same thing happened in South America. The British were interested in accessing the market in South America, so they supported the colonies when in the first couple of decades of the 19th century, they fought the Spanish authorities to become independent, and obviously they managed to do that.
Yes, and I have heard a story, which is that Bolivar, could you pronounce that better for me?
Simón Bolívar.
Thank you very much. Who was the leader of the Grand Colombian fight against the Spanish. He was so thankful of the British support in the war. They provided a lot of weapons and men towards the fight. He actually attempted to change the language of the new nation,
really,
to be English, but obviously he was voted against, and it was never brought in. But it was his plan to change the language. I
did not know that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's 100% true. I read it in one book, but I haven't checked my sources 100%. But it's a nice story. Yeah,
but listen, sometimes, as we say, the independence, for example, the 13 colonies becoming independent in North America, one can argue that that could have been a blessing in disguise.
Oh, could you describe that expression, a blessing in disguise?
When something apparently bad happens, but in the long term becomes something good. It might have been a blessing in disguise, because from that point on, the British focused on other parts of the world, like Australia and India, which over time became the cornerstone of the British Empire.
Okay, and this is the reason really why English is so important to learn as a language. Because of this colonization, English became the language which is spoken around the world, and hence why you need to take classes with Savvy to continue your English learning. And Pau, thank you very much for coming on the show today. It's been great chatting to you, and hopefully we can have another conversation in the future to discuss more of history. Thank you very much, Pau.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Savvy Podcast. We've covered the fascinating roots of the English language, how it evolved from its Germanic and Roman origins, moving away from Gaelic influences. In the second half, we journeyed through history from the Spanish Armada to colonial battles, exploring key moments that reshaped nations. Along the way, we picked up some useful vocabulary, how historical setbacks can be a blessing in disguise, what it means to break away from control, and how empires took over new territories. A huge thank you to Pau for sharing such insightful historical knowledge. Don't forget to click the link in the description for more examples and explanations of today's vocabulary. Thanks for listening and see you next time.